We're going to get started on our backs, so go ahead and lie down. We'll keep the knees bent with the feet on the mat. And as we lie down, we'll check our triple S. So that's making sure that the back of our skull, our shoulder blades or our scapula, and our sacrum right above the tailbone are down. So you can make sure we have a neutral spine. Let your eyes close. And just start to take a few deep breaths here. You can open your eyes or keep them closed. We're going to press into our feet. Curl the tailbone up toward the heels, almost like we're doing a little pelvic tilt backward. And then really squeeze your glutes to lift into a low bridge. So we're barely lifting the hips up off the mat. We don't want to lift up really high. We just want to find our neutral pelvis, making sure the low back feels long so it's not arching. That would be tipping the pelvis. We want to find our two pelvic points, which are the bony parts at the front of our hips, and really imagine that those two pelvic points could draw in toward each other. And then think about your pubic bone, the front of the pelvis, lifting up toward the belly button. We're going to keep the glutes nice and strong, holding this bridge pose. And segmentally lower down. So that means we're going to slowly lower the upper back, middle back, and lower back down. We'll lift up one more time for bridge. So once the sacrum comes down, we're going to do that again. Press into the feet, curl the tailbone up. Use your glutes to lift the hips into that low bridge. Find those two pelvic points, visualize them drawing in toward each other, and then think about your pubic bone, the front of your pelvis, lifting up toward the belly button. Really firm your glutes. We're going to hold here. Reach your right palm up toward the sky. Pull back across the right fingertips with the left hand. So we're just going to start stretching that right wrist. Try to keep that neutral pelvis as you hold your bridge pose. Switch sides, left palm up, pull back with the right fingertips, stretching the right wrist. Keep drawing those pelvic points in, firming the glutes. Hands will come back along the sides of your body, and we'll slowly lower upper back, middle back, and lower back down. Once the sacrum comes down, interlace your hands behind your head, cupping the skull, and we'll draw the elbows in. We want to make sure again that the sacrum is down, so we don't want any arch in the low back. That means the pelvis is tipping forward. So really make sure that sacrum is down. We'll take a big inhale here. As you exhale, lift up off your shoulder blades, tuck your chin in towards your throat, look down at those same pelvic points, and really imagine that they could draw in toward each other, getting into the deep low belly. Inhale to lower. Exhale, curl up off your shoulder blades. Tuck your chin towards your throat. Look at those pelvic points. Imagine them drawing in toward each other. Inhale to lower. Exhale, curl up off your shoulder blades, chin towards your throat. Look at the pelvic points, draw them in. Now look at your belly button and imagine that your belly button could pull down toward the ground. Inhale to lower. We'll do one more. Exhale, lift up, chin towards your throat. Draw those pelvic points in. Exhale to lower. Release your arms. We're going to make our way onto quadruped, coming onto hands and knees. So as we set up for our quadruped, our shoulders are going to be right over the wrist creases, hips right over the knees. So we don't want to be too wide here. That will tip the pelvis. So we want to hold that neutral pelvis. Lift your throat. You can imagine a broom behind your back. If you had a broom or stick behind your back, would it touch the back of your skull, your shoulder blades, and your sacrum? We'll slide this right foot back, firm that right glute,
Lift your right leg up without tipping the pelvis. So again, we want to think about drawing those pelvic points in, pressing evenly into the hands. Bend that right knee, and we'll do a little bit of hip rotation. So holding this really strong core and strong arms, we'll externally rotate the right hip. So your right knee will move out to the side a little bit, but don't let the whole pelvis turn. So pelvis stays the same, and then we'll internally rotate. Right knee comes in toward the left a little bit. Externally rotate that right hip. Internally rotate. Let's do one more. Externally rotate, hold that neutral pelvis. Internally rotate. Come back to neutral. Lower that right knee down. Recheck your triple S, make sure we're not tipping the pelvis. Lift the throat, slide your left foot back. Firm that left glute. Lift the leg, not too high, that will tip the pelvis. So really think about zippering your pubic bone up towards your belly button. Bend your knee. Hold that feeling of those pelvic points drawing in toward each other as we externally rotate that left hip. Internally rotate. Two more. Externally rotate, press evenly into the hands. Internally rotate. One more time. Externally rotate. Internally rotate. Come back to neutral. Lower that left knee down. Take a child's pose to give your wrists a little bit of a break. You can hold here, or you can roll the wrist if that feels good. And again, just focus back on your breath. Make your way back to that quadruped. And this time we'll move the pelvis as we move through cat-cow. So as you inhale, pelvis gets to tip forward, tailbone tips up, soften the chest down. Exhale, round your back as much as you can, really pressing into the hands, protracting the scapula away from the spine. Inhale, pelvis tips forward, chest softens. Exhale, round your back. If it feels good, you can bring your chin towards your chest. Do that a few more times, moving through this cat-cow to warm up your back. Come back to that neutral spine and we'll set up for downward dog. We're going to keep the weight in the hands, tuck the toes, lift the hips up, but walk the feet forward a little bit. So we want to shorten our stance. We don't want to be really wide in our downward dog. Let the feet walk in and then keep the knees bent. Heels don't have to touch. And we're going to think about lifting our hip creases right where our thigh bone meets the hip, up toward the ceiling without straightening the legs so we can find more of that hip flexion. Then check in with those front ribs. We want to feel like we're lifting the front ribs up toward the back body so that we don't sink into the shoulders. Staying really strong in the arms. If it feels good, you can pedal the feet out a little bit. Maybe moving the hips around. Anything that feels good to warm up your downward dog. But really work on keeping the weight in the hands. From this downward dog, we'll walk our hands back toward our feet. So we're going to walk toward the back of the mat, sitting back into the hips. If hands don't touch, hands can be on the shins, hands can be on the thighs. But now we want to think about our hip creases moving backwards. So we're really hinging at the hips. Anytime we hinge at the hips, knees should be right over the ankles, not further forward than the toes. So you can think about that broom behind your back again. Would it touch the back of your skull, your shoulder blades, and your sacrum? Keep that long spine as you rise to stand. And we'll walk to the top of the mat. Checking in with our mountain pose. So when we stand in mountain pose, we hold that neutral pelvis, which means it's not going to tip forward, not going to tip backwards. We're going to feel like those pelvic points are drawing in. Shoulders will stack right over the pelvis. Inhale, reach your arms forward and up. Lift your fingertips and your shoulder blades up. So shoulder blades reach up toward the ears. As you exhale, just like that hinge we were just in, bend your knees, send those hips back into a bent knee forward fold. So we're really working on hinging at the hips. We'll step it back to a plank pose. Lower your knees and pause here. Lift your throat. Check that pelvis. Make sure it's not tipping forward, tipping backwards. So we want to feel like those pelvic points are drawing in. Squeeze your glutes, they're part of the core. As you exhale, work on lowering the rest of the body in one piece, keeping the head of your arm bones away from the ground. So we're going to keep the shoulders lifted so they don't drop forward. Chin will come towards your throat. Imagine that you could lift your belly button off the mat, squeeze your glutes, draw your chest through for low cobra. So we're not trying to lift up really high. We're just trying to keep that low belly lifting as we draw the shoulder blades together. On an exhale, you can lift back to downward dog, or if it feels better, take child's pose. Maybe stretch it out in cat-cow. Whichever option you end up in, focus back on your breath. We'll take one more breath wherever you are. Walk your feet up towards your hands this time. Walking toward the front of the mat. Put that big bend in your knees. Sit your hip creases back. So we're really hinging at the hips in this forward fold. Press into your feet. Firm your glutes as you rise to stand. And again, anytime the arms lift up, we want the shoulder blades to glide up toward the ears. Exhale, sit back into the hips, hinging at the hips. Notice where your knees end up. Plant the hands, step back to plank. Lower your knees, lift your throat. So as we're in plank, think about that broom behind your back. Would it touch the back of your skull, shoulder blades, and sacrum? Squeeze your glutes. On an exhale, lower the rest of the way. Notice what touches the mat first. So we'll try to lower all together, keeping the top of the shoulders away from the ground. Chin is toward the throat. Try to lift that belly button away from the ground. Squeeze your glutes. Draw the chest through the hands for that low cobra. Lift to quadruped this time. So we'll come back to hands and knees. Right foot steps through your hands. Left knee stays down. Lifting up into a low lunge. So it's more like a 90-90 lunge. Our knees are at a 90-degree angle, and we'll check that pelvic bowl here. We want to make sure we're not tipping forward, so really draw those pelvic points in. Think about lifting the pubic bone up toward the belly button. Left glute is nice and strong, so the more we use this left glute, the more of a stretch we're going to get in the front of that left hip. Reach your arms up. Anytime the arms lift, feel the shoulder blades lift up, so you can imagine someone lifting you up by your fingertips. Keep firming that left glute. Lower the hands down. You can come to the fingertips if the palms don't touch. Find your right hip crease, so right where that right thigh bone meets the hip, and move that right hip crease back, so we're really flexing that right hip. Back of the pelvis should feel level, so right hip shouldn't be higher than the left. Right arm reaches out to the side. Rotate just your ribs 1 or 2 inches toward the right. So anytime we twist, we're only twisting the thoracic spine, not the low back and not the pelvis. Left ear will release down toward the left shoulder so the neck is relaxed. Big breaths in and out. Lower that right hand down. Step that right knee back into quadruped. Take 2 rounds of cat-cow to stretch it out. After your cat-cow, step your left foot through. Same thing on the other side. Lift up for your low lunge. Check that pelvic bowl. Make sure it's not tipping forward or back. Draw those pelvic points in. Reach your arms up. As your arms lift, feel like the whole rib cage is lifting up and away from the pelvis, so we're getting more length in the sides of the body. Firm that right glute to really open up the front of that right hip flexor. Keep reaching the fingertips up. Lower both hands down. You can come onto the right fingertips or lower that right palm down. Now we'll take that left hip crease right where the thigh bone meets the hip and move it back so that we're really flexing that left hip. Pelvis is level. Left arm reaches out. Rotate just in the rib cage so the low back doesn't move. Right ear releases to the shoulder. Big breaths in and out as we rotate the upper body. Lower that left hand down. Left knee steps back in. You've got those same options. You can take child's pose. You can stretch it out in cat-cow. Or you can come to downward dog. 2 breaths wherever you end up. If you're in downward dog, lift those hip creases. Lift the front ribs up toward the back body. Walk your feet up towards your hands. Bend the knees in that bent knee forward fold, hinging at the hips. Check where your knees end up. Press into the feet, rise up to stand. Lift the shoulder blades up toward the ears. Exhale, sit back into that hinging hip, forward fold. Step to plank pose. Lower the knees down in your plank. Lift your throat. Think about that broom behind your back. Squeeze your glutes as you exhale. Lower in one piece, keeping the head of the arm bones lifted away from the ground. Chin towards your throat. Lift your belly, squeeze your glutes. Imagine your palms sliding back like we're trying to worm the chest through the hands. Keep lifting the belly. Lift back to quadruped, back to hands and knees. Right foot will step through the hands again. This time, if it feels okay on your left foot, tuck the left toes. Lift up again for that low lunge. Check that pelvic bowl. Zipper the pubic bone up toward the belly so we're not tipping forward. We're going to clasp the hands in front and really firm the glutes. Rotate just the rib cage 1 inch toward the right. So we're going toward that front leg. As you rotate the ribs to the right, squeeze this left glute. Back to center. Rotate to the right, squeeze the left glute. Back to center. 2 more times. Rotate just in the ribs to the right. Back to center. Last one. Rotate your ribs to the right. Back to center. Lower the hands. You can untuck the left toes. Right leg will slide back behind in a 3-legged quadruped. Again, think about that triple S, back of the skull, scapula, and sacrum. Draw those pelvic points in. You can stay here or you can reach your left arm forward. On an exhale, we'll bend the knee toward the elbow any amount. They don't need to get close to touching. As you inhale, extend it out without arching the back. So keep zippering that pubic bone up toward the belly. Exhale, knee towards your elbow. Inhale, extend. Draw those pelvic points in. Exhale, knee towards your elbow. Inhale, extend. Lift the throat. 1 more. Exhale, knee towards your elbow. Inhale, extend. Release it down. 2 rounds of cat-cow to stretch it out. Come back to that neutral spine. Left foot steps through. You can tuck the right toes this time, lifting up for that low lunge. Check that pelvic bowl. Draw those pelvic points in. Clasp the hands in front. Rotate just the ribs toward the left, toward that front leg. Back to center. Rotate the rib cage toward the left and squeeze that right glute. Back to center, working on that thoracic rotation. Turn 1 or 2 inches to the left, squeeze that right glute. Back to center 1 more time. Rotate your ribs to the left, nothing in the lower body changes. Back to center. Lower your hands, untuck the right toes. Slide your left leg back. Shoulders are over the wrist creases. Check that upright pelvis here. Make sure it's not tipping. Right arm reaches forward. Stay here or exhale, knee comes anywhere toward the elbow. Inhale, extend it back out, draw those pelvic points in. Exhale, knee towards your elbow. Inhale, extend it back out, zipper that pubic bone up toward the belly. Exhale, knee toward the elbow. Inhale, extend, lift your throat. One more, exhale, knee towards your elbow. Inhale, extend it back out. Think about that triple S. Lower it down. Either take child's pose, cat-cow, or downward dog. 3 breaths wherever you end up. On your next exhale, bend your knees, walk your feet forward. Coming back into that bent knee forward fold, check where the knees end up. Think about that broom behind your back as you rise to stand. Reach those fingertips up, release the hands down. From our mountain pose, check again that posture. Make sure the pelvis isn't tipping forward or back. Shoulders stack right on top of the pelvis. We're going to bring one hand to the front of the pelvis, which is the pubic bone, and one hand to the back, which is the sacrum, and just squeeze your hands together a little bit, encouraging the pelvis to stay neutral as we work on some standing hip flexion. So we're going to pick up our right foot, which means our right hip is flexing. Try to limit any movement in the pelvis or the spine, and really firm that left glute since we're standing on the left leg. Step the right foot down and we'll switch. Try to make this transition as smooth as you can as you flex that left hip, firm the right glute, step it down. Flex the right hip, firm the left glute. Step it down, firm the right glute as you flex the left hip. Step it down. One more, flex the right hip. Pause here. We're going to keep the hands at the front and back of the pelvis as we step our right foot back. Bend both knees coming into a high lunge or crescent lunge. Squeeze the hands together. Keep that feeling in the pelvis as we reach the arms up. Really reach your fingertips up. Lift the whole rib cage up and away from the pelvis. Big breaths in and out. Bring the hands back to front and back of the pelvis. Maybe switch which hand is in front. Load that left foot. Get ready to put your weight on it. So really firm that left glute as the right foot steps to meet it. And we'll go back to that standing hip flexion. Give the hands a little squeeze. Flex your left hip, lifting it up without the pelvis or spine changing. Step it down. Flex the right hip, firm that left glute. Step it down. Make sure your shoulders are over the pelvis. Flex the left hip. Step it down. Flex the right hip. Step it down. Last one, flex the left hip. Hold here. Firm that right glute. Step your left foot back into that crescent lunge. Bend that left knee so the pelvic bowl stays upright and doesn't tip forward. Squeeze those hands together. Reach your arms up. Good. Imagine someone lifting you up by your fingertips so we're getting more of that length in the sides of the body. Keeping the glutes nice and active. Hands will come back to the pelvis. Get ready to step on that right foot. So get ready to put your weight on it as you step the left foot forward. Release the hands down. We're going to step our right foot back for warrior two. So our right foot will step toward the back of the mat with the toes facing the side of the mat. Left knee is bent. Make sure that your knee isn't rolling in toward the big toe. Check that pelvic bowl here. Make sure it's not tipping forward or back. Think about the tailbone grounding straight down, pubic bone lifting up toward the belly and really squeezing the glutes. Reach your arms out. We're gonna hold really strong in the legs, so try not to have any movement in the lower body, and we'll circle the arms back. As we circle, the movement is coming from our scapula, our shoulder blades. So that's where these circles should start. As you circle the shoulders and the arms, make sure the ribs aren't popping. So really hold those ribs in place, just the arms move. Just a few more moments here. Make sure the glutes stay nice and active. Release your arms, step it back to the top of the mat, and we'll switch sides. Left foot steps back, right knee is bent. Make sure that right knee isn't dropping in toward the big toe. Find that neutral pelvis, zipper that pubic bone up, squeeze your glutes, reach the arms out. As you're here, circle the arms back. And again, make sure the ribs aren't doing the moving, so feel like you're knitting those front ribs in as the shoulder blades start these circles for the arms. Check in with your breath. Release your hands, step it back to the top of the mat. Balancing in tree pose, we'll bring hands to the sides of the pelvis. Flex your right hip. So again, we're gonna pick up that right foot, firm that left glute. Anytime you're standing on one leg, we really wanna use the glute, especially that glute med, which is right on the side of the hip. We'll externally rotate the hip, so the knee will just move out to the side a little bit, but again, we don't wanna move the whole pelvis. Keep those two pelvic points facing straight forward as the hip rotates. Plant that right foot down for tree. So you can have the toes on the ground, you can have it a little bit higher, anywhere on this left leg, but we wanna make sure we're firming this left glute, drawing those pelvic points in. Bring your hands wherever you'd like for tree. You can have your hands at your heart, arms can be up, arms can be down, or you can have your hands somewhere on your body. Maybe if you need a little extra awareness to the pelvis, keep it there. Maybe on that left glute, maybe on the ribs, whatever feels the most helpful. Try to look somewhere in front of you as you balance. Check in with your breath. Release it down, shake out that left foot, especially if it was getting a little crampy, and we'll do that on the other side. Recheck that upright pelvis for your mountain pose. Hands come to the sides of the pelvis. Pick up your left foot, so we're flexing that left hip. Hold strong in that right glute. Without turning the pelvis, externally rotate just that left hip. Plant it for your tree. Toes can stay on the ground. It can come anywhere on that right leg, but really squeeze that right glute, zipper that pubic bone up, bring the hands anywhere for your tree. Wherever you'd like to balance. Try not to look down as you balance. Notice if you're clenching your jaw or really tensing your forehead. See if you can relax. Release it down, shake out that right foot. We're gonna come back to quadruped, so make your way back onto the mat. And we'll start to cool down with some cat-cow. You can move through our regular cat-cow if that's what your body needs. If it would feel good to move side to side with the hips, maybe the ribs. Just move in any direction that feels good for the next few breaths. Releasing any tension. Coming onto our backs again. Transition onto your back, and we'll keep
The knees bent with the feet on the mat, just like we did in the beginning of class. Checking that triple S. Feel the sacrum right above the tailbone on the mat, the shoulder blades or the scapula, and the back of the skull. Pick up your right foot, so we're flexing that right hip. Just like we did for tree, externally rotate. Now we'll bring the right ankle over the left thigh. So we're stretching that outer right hip. If this is plenty, stick with this. If you want to go a little bit deeper, you're going to take that right hand and just start to press that right thigh away, helping to externally rotate that right hip a little bit more, but make sure that your pelvis doesn't move. So we still want that feeling of drawing those pelvic points in. Our next option, if you want to go a little bit deeper into the stretch, is to pick up this left foot without interlacing the hands. So hands can stay somewhere on the body, sides of the body, or if it feels good, you can goalpost your arms, bending the elbows, bringing them up toward the head to get a nice open feeling in the front of the chest and shoulders. You can add a little bit of rocking side to side if that feels good while you stretch that right hip. Release that left foot down, then the right foot, and we'll switch. Flex that left hip, picking up the foot. Externally rotate. Cross that left ankle over the right thigh. So again, make sure the sacrum's down. We don't want to tip the pelvis by lifting that low back up. You can stay here. You can press that left hand into the left thigh, drawing those pelvic points in. Or if you'd like to go deeper, pick up that right foot. Any option with the arms, maybe goalposting the arms if that feels good for the chest. If you'd like, add a little bit of gentle rocking here. You're welcome to have your eyes closed. Release that right foot down, left foot comes down. We're going to hug both knees in toward the chest. You can grab onto the shins if that feels good and just rock side to side a few times. Maybe up and down if that feels good on the spine. Whenever you're ready, we're going to come into Shavasana. We'll take a quick Shavasana together. You can keep the feet on the mat, just like when we started. If it feels okay, feel free to extend the legs out all the way. But you just want to make sure that feels okay in the hips and low back. Arms can rest in any position. Let your eyes close. Relax your forehead. Soften your jaw. We'll stay for a few more deep breaths. You can always pause and stay longer. Take a big inhale through your nose. Slowly let it out through your mouth. Bend one knee at a time, rolling onto your right side, and just pausing there for 2 more breaths. Noticing how you feel in your mind, your body, and your energy. Make your way back to any seated position. We'll keep the eyes closed.
Take a moment to thank yourself for your practice today. Sending one grateful thought out into the universe. Thank you so much for practicing with me today.